Hi, everybody. Welcome to 2018 and the new episodes of Discussions in Education. If you don't remember, I'm Tony Alberts. I live in San Jose. I'm an educator, and a lot has happened since my last podcast. Well, let's just catch up. I have a new son. He's doing really well. His older brother really adores him and is a great older brother. I moved from the classroom to administration. So I'm no longer in the classroom setting. I'm now an administrator, and, heaven help us all as far as it goes. But it's been an exciting experience, but it's been a lot of learning. I've got a great admin to learn from, so I'm really excited about that. And I've got a lot of support, which is nice. But yeah, I wanted to start this new episode. Honestly, I was kind of... I've been trying to start this episode for the last couple of weeks, and it's been kind of hard to just sit down and do it because I've been lazy. Super lazy. Super lazy for just wanting some downtime and wanting to relax. But today, I listened to an episode of This American Life, and as I was listening to it, it was great. And I started crying. And I kind of felt that if I'm going to get moved by it, I should probably, share it. So if you don't listen to the podcast of This American Life, I highly recommend it. Ira Glass. The one I was listening to was part 2 of their small town. Oh man, I cannot remember the name of the town. This is awesome. I want to say like Arkleville or something like that. It was in Alabama. But I 100% am getting that name wrong. I know it. As soon as I'm saying it, I know it. But it was an episode examining like immigration and everything. So, I'm going to call somewhat this episode of my podcast. Let's go with the title, very grand, American Schools, the Microcosm. Oh, yes. Making up new words. American Schools, the Microcosm of the United States. Or of America. I guess that would rhyme better. It's right. I'll fix it on the actual title thing. But during the episode, what I found very interesting was how the town fought immigration, how members in the town led to the state being better able to fight immigration, even though ultimately all of their immigration efforts, their anti-immigration efforts in this instance, failed. And I need to clarify, it's not they're not the legal channels of immigration that they're trying to fight, even though they weren't trying to necessarily improve those, but they were trying to fight the undocumented immigration that occurs, specifically Mexican and Central American immigrants up here to, in the case of that town, a chicken processing plant to get jobs there. But what was interesting is both episodes kind of focused on the immigrant worker experience and then the townspeople experience and how everything was very split. You had workers who wanted to get to know their new neighbors and the Americans around them. There were those who were insular and just wanted to protect themselves and just get their job done and send money back or bring their family there. And with the townsfolk, it was the same, where you had folks who wanted to get to know them and incorporate them in the community, and you had those who felt they were destroying the community and introducing terrible things. I think the final verdict was like concerning financial drain, that for the workers, our government total payout to them if they're no degree and they're there for, in that case, the chicken processing plant, over 75 years, including their kids and grandkids, our government total would pay out $21,000 over the 75 years. Whereas with an American citizen of kind of the same background, no high school, working in a low labor, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars over 75 years for them and their kids. So it was just an interesting look at least at the financial aspect. But one of the things they pointed out at the end of part 2 was how the schools in that county and the district specifically in that city did pretty much the exact opposite of what the local government and the citizens did. Even though, I mean, the schools are made up of the citizens, so that's not really clear there as far as it goes. But the schools created outreach programs. They did training for their teachers to get them familiar with their students' backgrounds, sending them on trips. And in doing so, they have the best graduation rates for Hispanic, Latino, Latinx students. They have like great, not huge success, but they are doing better than the state average of Alabama concerning the success of their immigrant students. And, all I could think as I was thinking of it is, with a lot of the negative things that have gone on about public schools, how positive of a message that was. And it really made me think about how much we're currently going through has already occurred in schools. But how our constant opinion of schools is not real life constantly causes us as citizens, as the government, to look at them not as areas for experimentation and for lesson, but rather just something separate than what's happening to the country. And I think that idea that school life is separate than our life is so ingrained in us that the terrible things that are happening in schools or the wonderful things that are happening in schools, people don't see how that not only is attached to the communities and the world around them, but they're also not seeing necessarily how lessons can be learned from them. Because as I was listening to this episode, the first thing I was thinking about was in California, back when immigration was a big issue in school districts, specifically, I'm thinking LA, and I mean, there's a bunch of great movies about, the protests led by students for fairer education for immigrant students, and how schools in California, but also schools everywhere, have been forced to deal with immigration, loss of money, this like super divided nature of the student body sometimes depending on where the school is located, especially like in districts that I tend to work in, where there do tend to be, I mean, in San Jose area, it's pretty much most districts, there's a very high income and a very low income community that is supposed to come together and find common ground and create a safe environment for students and to help them achieve. But it's so hard. It's so hard. The things they don't understand, the things they assume about each community, their views, their opinions, and then you add on top of that the cultural opinions as well. So there's a lot going on as far as it goes. But just, it would be interesting if politicians really looked at what was going on in schools and said, what can we learn here that we can apply to, say, the counties and the districts? And that's something too that as an admin I'm starting to see, and it's more obvious now. It was always obvious before. I was always worried about, I know in previous episodes we talked about the coming teacher shortage and stuff like that, but as an admin it really starts hitting home. And I don't necessarily know how to talk about this in a positive way. One of the things I've talked about with other admins, but also just even my wife, other teachers, is how torn we are in that, we are in a very fulfilling profession. But it's in such a state right now, such a state of flux, such a state of antagonism, such a state of fear and uncertainty, that it's hard to encourage others to join that. one of the big things I'm seeing in a lot of the administrative, I joined the administrative newsletter called AXA, or the organization. I honestly can't remember what the acronym stands for. That's how much of a newbie I still am. But one of their constant articles is, how to deal with the coming teacher shortage. And, obviously the place that's hit hardest first is special ed. The special education teachers are sorely needed. Always in such high demand. And districts are always low on them or not hiring them in time. A lot of the time, these kids who need someone skilled and capable the most, often the ones with long-term subs who have no idea what's going on and are just trying to get by. And you have a lot of the times requirements for psychologists, and they're not around. And I'm not saying this is Barry. Yes, I'm saying this is every school district, and it has a lot to do with funding. There's no money. It's hard for them. It is in one way. It's cheaper to. In the short term, it sounds cheaper to hire a psychologist, but in the long term, and the way districts look at their planning is, okay, in the long term, if we create these positions, that's this many other positions that we have to make sure we're paying into retirement for, this many positions that we're providing benefits for. As they go up the tenure ladder, that's more money. All these considerations that obviously in the short term as an admin, it's super frustrating because that the kids aren't getting the best service that they deserve. But at the same time, I can't blame the district, because obviously if they can't afford something, if they have no money to pay someone, how do you create that position? And a lot of people look at the reserves that districts have. If you are not familiar with education, part of the requirement for budgets is that every district has to maintain what's called a reserve fund. And for what I understand, again, my understanding is not even 100%, but my understanding is, should there be a massive budget shortfall like what happened in, I think, 2007, 2008, and suddenly the district spending money is cut in to 10% of what it was, they need to have the funds to be able to run the district for the next 3 years, hoping that in 3 years there's some sort of economic recovery so they can start getting their money back again. So, I mean, that's the idea. A lot of districts, vary. I think the requirement is 3%. That might be totally wrong. It's hard when you're talking to admin and district and unions and teachers. Like, everybody's got a different number. But it's a weird thing being on the admin side. In a way, I deal with students a lot more. I'm an assistant principal, so I'm in charge of discipline. I get to know students not in the classroom setting, so there's definitely students that I like that teachers are like, how do you like that child? They drive me crazy. And I'm like, well, I don't, I used to have that kid in class. I remember, they broke my heart and made me slam my head against the wall. But, as an admin, I don't have to deal with them all the time. I can talk with them on a different level. And that has been a very refreshing part of my job. Being able to support teachers and support students in a way that I feel is equitable is a huge, huge thing. And the fact that I have a principal that lets me do what I feel is right. I've known a couple assistant principals in my time, and even principals who kind of get forced into how they're supposed to operate. And I always felt bad, and that was always my worry. But like I said, I'm hugely lucky this year. I've got a great team as far as admin goes, and it's a good learning experience. Let's just put it that way. But, one of the things that I'm always kicking around is kind of what's happening overall in education and what's happening in all the schools everywhere. And I think we're reaching a point where we're not reaching a point. We've gone past the point. We've gone past the point where education needs that major overhaul. And I've talked a couple of times about this. I don't want to say like hundreds of times, but I haven't done 100 podcasts. I've talked a couple of times about this, which is that we need to figure out as a country what our priority is. I feel like for a very long time, education was more well-rounded, but super racist. like, there's no doubt about that. Back in the day, they used to have great shop program. I'm sorry I'm saying so much. It's been a while since I've done podcasts. I'm noticing it, and it's annoying me. So if it's annoying you, I apologize. But back in the day, they used to have shop programs, wood shop, auto, pottery, varied arts, all sorts of electives, home ec, whatever it might have been, teaching basic skills, allowing kids to get outside of just the pure academic aspect of their lives and get to something more physically, manually creative or applicable, just applying some of the academics, especially a class like wood shop and auto shop, where they can start applying measurement conversions and understanding how things get put together and angles and all sorts of useful things. But unless, if you're not aware, historically, a lot of brown and black kids got sent to those classes, even if they were high achieving kids, because that's where they were going to end up anyway, was the opinion. And this is, 80s thinking. So 70s, 80s, 60s, 50s, a lot of that sort of thinking. And then there was this big push for standards, and standards came along. And then for some reason, and I completely understand it, a lot of it was a civil rights aspect of all kids should be able to go to college. And that is true. That is 100% a true statement. The problem is that then they applied that to all schools and all students, whether or not they wanted to, whether or not that was their interest. And in doing that, and then forcing testing to follow that, and funding to follow that formula. I mean, there was a recent article, was it the New York Times? I can't remember. One of my friends posted it that said, we're now at a point where, I don't think it was the New York Times, but anyway, I know people like Mike Rowe, the guy from Dirty Jobs, have been spouting this for a while, and he's been definitely going around and pushing it. But we as a nation have looked down on that physical manual labor, when in reality, as great as our society might grow up and become, and all the amazing things we might create, if all we are is a bunch of academics, we're going to have a hard time making that stuff. Unless we get a machine that can make it. But I'm curious as to who's going to create that machine in the first place. It does have to be a balance. And we can have that balanced system without being racist. We can say all kids are capable of going to college, while then allowing them the choice to decide whether or not college is the way they want to go. For example, I've got a student now who is really clear. His dad is a mechanic for a fleet, and he wants to be a fleet mechanic. That's his goal. He loves welding. He loves building stuff. He likes constructing. None of his classes allow him to do that. None of them. In middle school, none of his classes allow him to do that. So why would he care about education at all? the thing he wants to learn, the thing he wants to do. I mean, the thing that I have to communicate to him is like, well, listen, this is a hoop you have to jump through in order to get to where you want to go. In order to do that, you need to at least get your high school diploma, and then you can go to a trade school, blah, blah, blah. But it is a terrible system. It's awful. It's awful that we do this to kids who have specific dreams, and that we look down on people who want to physically create as if they are lesser than someone who wants to go and become an engineer at school. And you know, that's the argument always was like, well, if this kid wants to be an auto mechanic, then he should learn how to be an engineer. But that's different. That's different. And teaching him how to be an auto mechanic earlier on, like giving him the skills now, so that by the time he gets to the end of high school, gets his high school diploma, can go and apprentice and become a journeyman, get a job at a shop, that sets him up for success in a way that he can see, he can enjoy. And not only that, it gives him success in school. This is a kid who doesn't have much success in school. In fact, I'll go so far as to say he has no success in school because the things that he feels smart at, we don't appreciate. And we don't allow him to explore. There's no class for that. And overall in education, I mean, the hard part is again, it goes back to that funding. As a country, we don't care. Right? I'm still marking this episode explicit. Even as an admin, I'm sure this is going to bite me so hard in the future. But, you know, I tell my kids you have to be true to yourself. And I tell them that there are times where swearing is appropriate, swearing is not appropriate. You know, I don't swear at people. I prefer not to. I don't know. It's just a thing. I like swearing with people. It's fun. But I don't know how more clearly in education we could tell such a large chunk of our student body that they are fucking failures. And that's messed up. Like, for me, that hurts inside. Because that's not failure. You know, I've done all my K-12 education. Then I went on to college. Then I got my master's degree. Then I had to get my admin credential. Then I'm clearing my admin credential now. It's just more school. It's just more work. It's education. People aren't all built for that. And even if they are built for it, some people still don't want that. But we have this bizarre belief in this country, and we have a bizarre belief in education that everyone has to be. And it's so draining. It's draining on the kids. It's draining on us. It makes everyone feel like failure. And I think that's a large part of some of the anger that people are experiencing across the country. And obviously, yeah, some people are just racist and some people are just assholes. And that's just the way that goes. Welcome to life. But a lot of the anger is just this split that we've created where we don't want to acknowledge that, you know, the people who build homes or the people who deal with the electricity, people who deal with plumbing, people who care about our streets, people who take care of our communities, that they're worth something. You know, my oldest son, maybe about 2 months ago, started saying he wants to be a firefighter. And everyone, you know, every kid's going to say they want to be every job as far as it goes. Honestly, though, here's the thing. When I was like 7 or 8, I said I wanted to be a jack of all trades. And I've talked about this. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a jack of all trades. Guess what? That's what I ended up being. I wanted to learn how to do stuff. And I've done all sorts of stuff because of what I'm capable of. Because of the things that I decided to learn along the way. You know, I'm proud of being an admin. I'm proud of being in education. It's a hugely fulfilling thing. You know, it makes me like getting up in the morning. I like going to work. I'm not always happy going to work, but I do like it. I love it. It is the right choice. I made the right choice as far as that goes. But because of everything that I've been interested in life, of the things that I've asked people to teach me, I've been able to do so much more than that I'm also equally proud of. I built a shed in the backyard. Like, that might not be so. It's an 8x12 shed. You know, it's a big ass wooden shed in my backyard. It's got a solid foundation. I mean, I'm sure if an actual builder came out and looked at it and they were like, "Oh, Jesus Christ," you know, but it's stable. It's full of all my junk. Like, I love it. I love that. Every time I look at it, I get proud. Because my wife helped me put on parts. My son helped put in some nails. Even some neighbor kids that used to live around here helped put in parts. They wanted to help hammer. And I love that. I love being able to do that with them. You know, we don't have that at school. And that's something I'm proud of. I installed the garbage disposal. Okay, I didn't do the electrical wiring because I would kill myself probably. Like, that's something I feel I need some basic training on before I start wiring the house. And I know some people are like, "You could just figure it out." I'm like, that's one for me that my comfort level doesn't allow. But once that the outlet was put underneath, I installed the garbage disposal. I reset the piping underneath based on, tutorials and how it should look, and it works great. It works great. Yeah, I've had plumbers come out and take a look at it, and they said, "No, it's fine. It's not the greatest." No, it is not the greatest. It is very clearly a do-it-yourself job, but I feel proud about that. I can feel proud about my academic achievements and the manual achievements that I've done in my life, and it doesn't make me lesser. And the fact is that if this boy at my school had access to something that valued at school, and I'm not talking superficially like a club, I mean classes where he could achieve based on the stuff he loves to do, the stuff that he loves, like working on and figuring out, that positive boost encourages people to do other things. And that's like some basic psychology. If you start feeling confident, you feel more confident to do other things. Because if you fail at those other things, you got something good to fall back on. And we've really forgotten that as a country in education. And it's sad. It is really sad. It's a heartbreaking part. And that's why when people say, like, "Oh, I'm interested in becoming a teacher, that's the route I want to go," I tell them, like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. That the staff that I'm working with now, they've got a lot of veteran teachers, and they are so burnt out. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, they have seen a lot. They have had to deal with a lot. And sometimes they've been supported, and sometimes they haven't. They've been jerked around. And all throughout, they've seen everything this does to the kids. And some of them have taken on the attitude of like, well, if you guys at the top clearly don't give a crap about these kids, then why should I? Because it's hard. You can care for 3 or 4 years about what happens to kids. But again, it goes to that. I think a lot of reports come out of, police gallows humor. Like, they get to a crime scene and they're making jokes. And often their thing is, well, this is how you deal with it. This is how you deal with the terrible things you see in and out. You have to joke about it. You have to make light of it. Even if it sits heavy on you, you can go get counseling later. But in the moment, like, you can't sit with it. You don't have the time. You don't have the thing. And that's the thing with teachers that people like to ignore. Teachers see and hear terrible things every year. I want you to think about that. Think of an average elementary school teacher. Okay, they've got, depending on where they're lucky enough to live, anywhere from 20 to 36 kids in their classroom. Right? Think about being a 20-year veteran. think about at least every year you've got the following. You got one student being abused by a relative. You got one student homeless. You've got two that are new to the country, don't speak English, don't know what's happening. One is from such a negative background that they're just lashing out all the time. You've got 5 high-achieving students whose parents are on you all the time about how your class is not challenging them. We got a bunch of students in the middle, some who aren't that good, whose parents are also challenging you, saying that their student's capable of more. And you're like, they don't like this. I don't know why you're pushing them so hard. Like, let's find what they enjoy doing and we can start pushing them there. And then imagine every time you try to do something, there's nothing to support them. Or that the supports are so sporadic that it's pretty much useless. How long do you let that affect you before you start shutting off? I mean, honestly, how long can you stand to see that much terrible stuff happening and not receive counseling? You know, constantly being told that, well, that's great, I know you're dealing with that kid, but you got to achieve here, or you're not running your classroom right. You know, your administrator changes every couple of years, so then you got to approach kids a whole new way, or the same way. Just depends. You have to figure that out. It's a lot of stuff that tears you down. It's constantly tearing you down. Now add special ed to this. You know, you add special ed. Not only that, I mean, you get people maxed out on their caseloads. I think probably the best caseload amount, and what caseload means is just how many kids you as a special ed teacher have to evaluate, help, assist. Honestly, good number's probably about 10. Just because the amount of attention, the amount of figuring out what works best, and not only that, but also supporting them if they're mainstream, which that's the big push, is mainstreaming them. I honestly have never met a special ed teacher who has less than 15 students on their caseload. And that's a lucky special ed teacher. Some have like 20, and that's insane. 20, 25. The amount of testing, the amount of support, the amount of parent meetings, contacts, working with their teachers, everything. So many more hours. So many more hours. Get paid the same as every other teacher. You know, maybe they get a stipend if they got their master's. But I got a stipend as I didn't have to worry about all that extra paperwork. I still got the master's stipend. I'm at a loss. And I've experienced kind of the range of education. We're working in Mountain View, Wissman, where money was a worry, but not that much. You know, the district could apply for bonds and measures, and as long as they could justify it and explain what was happening, the community had the money to support it. And they could do fundraising, and they had PTA support, and all of that is additional money. I remember in Mountain View at the start of every year, I think I got $200 to just spend on my classroom, or $300 or $400. That's great. That's insane. That's insane. That's a lot of money. But that's what you get in the higher income districts. I know my wife, when she worked in Los Altos, I think a parent didn't like her classroom. So the parent bought her a new classroom. And I want you to think about that. Because in buying a new classroom, she got whiteboards up, she got new seating, she got technology. That probably totaled $30,000. That was from a parent who didn't like the fact that their kid was going to be in what they considered a backwards classroom. That doesn't exist in my district. I mean, there are definitely parents rich enough to do it, but not as consistently. Not every year. I don't want to be doom and gloom. Okay? But what I am saying again is, our schools are a microcosm of America. Right? So the question is where are we investing? We're not investing in our schools. So it's pretty clear that we're not investing in America as far as it goes. We're trying to force all our kids to achieve something that a lot of them don't want to do. A lot of them don't want to do. And that honestly, realistically, based on all the reports that came out over the last 15 years, there's not jobs for. You can only hire so many literature majors. Philosophy is helpful, but there's only so many jobs for those. So, it's pretty clear that our emphasis in the country hasn't been on the working class. You know, my Democrat friends obviously hugely talked up Hillary. And, you know, obviously there's some real issues with our current president. Real issues and concerns. Like, whatever side of the aisle, if you think that he's amazing and perfect, you're as blinded as the people who say that Hillary was the perfect candidate. You're just as blind. Both of you. You know, I heard on a Joe Rogan podcast recently. I can't remember who he was talking with. But I think he described Trump as the problem that could save America or something like that. Essentially that he's the catalyst showing everything that's wrong, and then hopefully afterwards change will come. But honestly, if you look at schools, that's not that's not what's happening. There's major push on the side of the schools to change stuff. But the public, the government, other than changing regulations or making new mandates, there's not a lot. That worries me. I don't know if you know this, but I have 2 kids. But even if I didn't have 2 kids, that worries me. I like my students. I love a lot of my students. They are good kids. I'm not saying they're great kids sometimes, but they are good people. Right? Even the ones that people are like, oh, this kid. Like, I look at them and I'm like, I know why you're making all those decisions. They make perfect sense at where the terrible, terrible, terrible decisions you are making all make perfect sense to me. I completely understand why you're making them. And teachers like to pretend like, oh, this kid's an idiot. I don't understand why they're making. You know. We all know. And what worries me is that there's that lack of understanding, that lack of empathy. And you can have empathy without approval, if that makes sense. I can understand all the terrible decisions a student's going to make. Heck, I can even understand all the terrible decisions a staff member is going to make. And I cannot support it at all. You know, I can attempt to support them to make better decisions, smarter decisions, more positive decisions. Hell, I'm sure they look at me and they see terrible decisions I'm making and they wish they could support me somehow. And oftentimes they offer to, both students and staff. But, you know, I think Dan Carlin in his last episode of Common Sense kind of brought up the point of, you know, where do we go if there is no common sense? What's the next step? And I think for me, it's not that I feel that there's no common sense. But I do feel like there is a genuine lack of a desire to feel love for others. And I think a lot of it is tied, again, to that lack of love for oneself. I mean, in my experience, the people who scream the loudest about how great they are and how much they love each other, or love themselves, not each other, but, love themselves, like the ones who scream it, harass people with that fact and then deride others. Those are the people who hate themselves. I feel like in the U.S. right now, we got a lot of people who hate themselves. A lot of people who hate themselves. And I do blame schools for a pretty decent chunk of that. Because again, when you tell working class people that their jobs don't matter and that the end goal should be college, that creates a lot of self-hate. There have been plenty of movies about that, where the kid from the working class family hates his family because of how backwards they are and how uneducated they are, and he goes off to college, or she goes off to college and becomes educated and learns the right way, and then comes back and is derisive and mean, and then some magical thing happens where they realize how amazing and all the sacrifices their parents made, or parent, or guardian, or family, whatever it might have been. And even though we've seen those movies, that's just a trope. That's nothing to us. But that's the truth. As a country, for some reason, we set our goal for 20 years. And it was set at the working class as not worth it, and college education is the only way to go. And I'm not saying I want more auto plants and stuff like that. I'm not suggesting that bringing coal back is the way to go. I am sorry I'm calling on everyone else, but there's been a lot of stuff that I've been listening to and laughing about. But, I listened to a comedian the other day. Oh, it was the Chappelle special, the newest Chappelle special on Netflix. And one of them, he points out that he doesn't want those Chinese jobs. Let's not bring them over here. That's a terrible job for us to have. Nobody wants to work that cheap or that low. And he obviously, let me be clear, he sets up that joke really well. So watch the special. If you haven't seen them, I consider them pretty powerful. They're pretty good. I laugh my ass off. But our biggest problem now is that our schools, again, mimic our government, mimic our country. Our schools move like dinosaurs. Let's be clear about that. And a lot of it's because it's been legislated. The California curriculum standards and expectations, the A through G requirements. A lot of that is slow to change because it's set in stone so solidly that it requires a lot of change and a caring on other people's parts. I'm sure some people out there will point out to high schools. Okay, so I will bring some bright spots. High schools, especially the ones that I know in San Jose, have been increasing the number of job training programs. So I know that a couple high schools have created like health programs to kind of get kids interested in pre-med for nursing. I know there's a lot of child development classes. There are some high schools with auto and obviously like woodworking classes, mechanic classes, stuff like that. There's obviously JROTC and a lot of other support programs. But at the same time, by the time kids get to high school, I'm just saying, based on all the reading I've done since I become a teacher, since I was in my master's program, all the reading says the decision to stay in high school is made their freshman year. But realistically, it's made in middle school. And I want you to think about that carefully. The reason is because depending on your performance in middle school, you either get choice in high school or you get no choice. And I'm always emphasizing that to kids. And if you are outside education and you don't realize that, let me repeat. If you do poorly in middle school, you get no choice in high school. You get the remedial classes. Sometimes they've got a job program that they can get you into. But especially if you're a special ed kid, unless you're going to a super dedicated progressive high school, the amount of choice you have is nothing. And then they end up dropping out. And let me explain the system. Kid learns in middle school, kid learns throughout elementary school and middle school, the things they love to do aren't worth crap. Nobody cares. Whoop-de-doo. You like to build cars. Good for you. And then, you stop caring. Well, if you don't care about the things I like, why should I care about you? So you stop performing. You start failing. They offer you all the interventions. They offer you all the supports. But none of it's what you really want. So you keep failing. You fail through middle school. You get to the end of middle school. Maybe you graduate with a 1.0. Maybe you graduate with a 1.5. Maybe you graduate with a 0.23. That happens. That's the GPA. I mean, I've seen kids with a 0.23. Just failed 6th and 7th and 8th grade, or failed 7th and 8th grade, depending on the type of school you're at. Then you go to high school. All right, they got their requirements. These are the classes you need to take in order to graduate. Let's get you to those. But maybe in order to graduate, you need algebra. But you're not algebra yet, so we're going to put you in the pre-algebra support class and the math support class for that one. Your reading level is not where it needs to be, so we're going to put you in the remedial reading level and all the remedial classes. Maybe you're lucky enough to get an elective, so you get that elective. You drop out your freshman year, get a job, start working, realize that the thing you want to do, I've been screwing around, I've been messed up, all this other stuff, so whoop-de-doo, now I have to go back and do it. You're 19, 20, 21 now. Maybe you got in some trouble with the law, because that's the school to prison pipeline. You get in trouble with the law at that point because you done dropped out, you got nothing else. Nobody really wants to hire you because you dropped out of high school. So you're selling drugs or you're doing other things. Maybe you've got family who can employ you if you're lucky. Maybe you get someone pregnant. Okay, now you got to start making real money. They keep harassing you about that. You got to pay your child support, or you got to help raise your kid. So you get to 20, 21. Then you decide, okay, I finally want to be that mechanic. So you go off to school, adult continuation school. That's going to take a couple years. Maybe you're 24, 25. I mean, you're working full time. Maybe you're working 2 jobs and going to adult continuation ed to get your GED. And you finally finish that when you're 25, 26, 27. That's 10 years later now. 10 years later than when you could have graduated high school and been set. 10 years of wasted time. And I would love to say that's a rare story, but it's not. This is a common story. Hey, this is an honest truth. I can guarantee you high school teachers have seen this plenty of times. I know middle school teachers have seen this plenty of times. You get that kid who comes back and they're like, oh yeah, it didn't work out. And you're like, damn it. Every time, you're like, damn it. Unless you got to the point where you stop caring. You're like, yeah, I knew. And that happens too. But we as a country don't care. Yet. We'll care. We'll get there. And, that's the optimist side of me. I have an inherent faith in people. I don't know why. I think I get that from my mom. Definitely not my dad. He's way too pessimistic to believe that one. But definitely the inherent goodness of people I think I get from my mom. And that's my hope. One of the things I'm going to try doing is start reading some of the admin articles. Like, there's a book that my superintendent passed out that she has us reading. It's Power of Moments. It's a really good one. It talks about how in order to, feel successful, you have to create situations where you have to create celebrations. You have to create moments. You have to create high moments. The example they give at the beginning of the book is of a hotel near Disneyland, which is, if you go in the hotel and you look around, it's just kind of normal, whatever, your regular standard, like 3-star motel. But this place has constantly 5 stars. And one of the things they do is they offer, unlimited DVD rentals, and they have a snack bar, and at the pool they have a red hotline that if you pick it up and you ask for a popsicle flavor, they will bring it to you. A butler will bring it to you on a silver platter. So they were talking about how you can't do much about the everyday potholes that you're going to run into. You definitely want to fix any major problem. So obviously if there's a hotel room that's leaking or full of fleas or something, that's a big problem. You'd want to fix that. But you're never going to fix all the little annoyances that people have. But in order to make something memorable, you have to create these kind of special moments and celebrate them and acknowledge people during them. And obviously one of her points is what are we doing in Berryessa? What are we doing in our district in order to create those moments, not only for students, but for staff, for the community? Where are our celebrations? Which I think it's a great point. So one of the things I was thinking of doing, I'm contemplating the great point, and I'm going to continue reading the book. I'm reading chapter 3 right now, or 4. I can't remember which chapter I'm on. Anyway, but one of the things that I'm going to start doing for the podcast is kind of talking about what's actually in education news. There's a lot of stuff out there that's coming. A lot of it's repetitive. I'll try to avoid some of that, but I figure, let's make this somewhat useful. I'll disseminate some of the ideas and give you kind of my educator on the ground opinion. I guess maybe I can't claim to be that anymore. Admin on the ground opinion. Even though I did teach for 8 years, and people were like, well, I taught for 15 or 20 years, and then I became an admin. Yes, I know you're amazing and awesome, but again, going back to why I decided to become an admin, I just felt it's where I'm most effective. And I got to do what's better for students. So if it's better for students for me being an admin, I think that's the better choice. As much as I love being in the classroom, as much as I like talking with kids and families, I get to talk with kids and families all the time now. Sometimes not for very nice things, but it is something where I can build a connection and build bridges that, at least in my school and previous years, are kind of burned down, which is nice. I'm not going to go on much longer. I just kind of want to give you that. That's what I'm thinking. I will be making a concerted effort, a very, very hard effort to start doing a podcast at least once every 2 weeks. I'm going to try for once a week. That might be a little hard, realistically. Maybe I will be able to meet with other people. It's weirder now as an admin. I'm not sure what the lines are. Asking a fellow admin to sit down, they might not be as comfortable with having these discussions that are recorded online for all to hear. But, maybe I'll talk with folks outside of education. I still obviously have my friend Matt at the county office. I'm hoping to do a couple with him. I like talking with him. He and I have good discussions all the time. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking forward to, and I'm really trying to get back on the ball now that my life has kind of reached a very positive moment. I wish I could say that for more people out there. But I know in this instance, I've been very, very lucky to be where I'm at, to be who I am. There were a lot of people who made me what I consider the good man that I am. And I'm very thankful to all of them. And I would list them all off, but y'all don't have time for another hour of podcasts. And neither do I. So much love to all of you. I hope things are going well. If you've got any topics you want me to talk about or rant on or whatever, please send it to me. I really appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter. I don't tweet, so good luck with that. But it is at AALBERTS 23, Alberts 23. I do share a lot of random stuff. I am on Instagram. Unless you're a close friend, though, I ain't adding you there. You can find me. But, yeah, I just post pictures of my kids, so that's not happening. Unless I know you. Sorry about that. But you can also email me at Mr. Alberts p.d@gmail.com. So that's Mr. P.D@gmail.com. And that's my kind of generic teacher email, educator email. The PD, just so you know, that stands for Portable D. That was my very first classroom. So, back in the Franklin McKinley days. Again, I love all you suckers. You're all good people, no matter what other folks say. And much love. Have a good night. Bye.